Hi, I'm Mary.
And I'm Katie, and this is The Housewife Did It.
True Crime Edition. If you like the way we tell true crime stories, obviously don't expect you to like the content. If you do, it'd be
If you love murder.
um some people have favorite murders apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Um if you like the way we tell true crime and you want to help us be able to continue doing it and getting better at it, then you can like, subscribe, or follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Leave comments, share with people, give us reviews, start a discourse. I've noticed our some of our best performing YouTube videos are the ones that have comments. So
Mm-hmm.
helps people find us.
Go fight with people if you want, just not
Yeah,
us.
yeah. Well, we fight back.
All right. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna mention as like kind of a real-time true crime, but just interesting. I did start watching the TikTok dance cult thing
Yes. It's
on
so good.
Netflix. I haven't started the Dallas Cowboys one, so I don't know anything about
We
that.
finished that one too. I will say,
But it's good. The
yeah,
TikTok one.
if you like that one, there's one on Peacock that we just watched. I think it's called like the TikTok Star Murders or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's also really good. Um, and there's a new season out of Worst Roommate Ever that includes
Mm.
an episode. Do you remember when those suitcases were found in like 2020, like right when COVID happened and people were like starting to like geocache again? It's like an outdoor activity. And somebody made a TikTok where they found suitcases at the beach and they opened them and there was a body inside.
Mm-mm.
Well, that happened and it was viral and it was like bonkers, and there's an episode on it in Worst
Wow.
Roommate Ever, and I was like finally, I had no idea that they like knew what had happened. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love Worst Roommate Ever.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, Sammy was like, he said, these aren't like the first season. Nobody's been murdered yet. I said, oop, somebody's been murdered in every single episode except the first one. And he was like, oh, I thought this season was like just like bad roommates. I was like, why would they do that?
Right.
And he was like, well, because on the last season there was that old lady that like buried a bunch of people in her yard. And I was like, yeah, these are just like singular murders, not
Yeah.
Dorothea Puente.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well,
whatever.
no singular murders here today.
I
we
feel.
have we have a serial. A serial. Content warning is sexual assault,
Mm-hmm.
dismemberment, graphic details, and just copious amounts of violent misogyny.
And also, if you look it up, there's so many pictures.
Yeah.
So
So
be careful.
our friend here is vocal and draws and writes, and so if you look it up, you'll find things, and they're not great. So, let's get into it. Gerard John Schaefer ended up on the police's radar for the first time in 1972, or at least for the first time as a suspect. Schaefer was a sheriff's deputy in Martin County, Florida, when he admitted to his superior that he had messed up by tying two women to trees and torturing them before they escaped.
Oh.
He was fired and charged with aggravated assault, but would spend the next 6 months living in the community while awaiting his trial. What you'll find here is this is likely not where the story begins and definitely not where it ends. So, Gerard John Schaefer was born in Wisconsin in 1946. His father was a drunk His words, I realize. We call that an alcoholic. His
Mm-hmm.
father was a drunk and a womanizer. Gerard always believed that his parents preferred his sister over him. Even at a young age, he had some disturbing interests. He began to steal women's underwear, hunt and kill animals, and tie himself to trees. But what would take him from being a strange kid to the man described as the most sexually deviant person ever encountered, and who earned the nicknames Killer Cop, the Hangman, and the Butcher of Blind Creek. The Schaefer family moved to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where Gerard would eventually remain. His classmates in high school were asked what they remember about him, and although most of them found him unremarkable and didn't remember much, they did describe him as creepy and said that he was known for looking up girls' skirts. He would tell anyone who would listen that his neighbor, Lee, would tease him by getting undressed in her room where he was able to see her.
No.
How dare she? This seems to make him quite angry. I mentioned that he enjoyed killing animals, which is not at all abnormal in the stories of serial killers, but what was strange was what he did afterward. Gerard would torture, kill, and decapitate cows before sodomizing them. In 1964, when he
This
was
must
18,
be really hard for you.
yeah, but that's all for that. Moving on. In 1964, when he was 18 years old, his parents filed for divorce. His mother cited extreme cruelty as the reason for divorce, and shortly after, his father entered rehab for alcoholism. It wasn't long before Gerard couldn't keep his sexually deviant fantasies to himself. His high school girlfriend, Sandra London, says that he sometimes really wanted to hurt women. He told her this.
Sometimes.
He would later tell his college professor the same thing. She was also a woman. When he was around 22, he got married to a woman named Martha. Their marriage did not continue for long after he told her what he wanted sexually. We don't have the details of what he shared with her, but he told her that they were no longer sexually compatible, and they divorced less than 2 years later. Martha cited extreme cruelty as the reason for her divorce. Full circle moment. And Martha has since refused to talk about the details of her marriage to anyone. In 1966, 2 years before his marriage to Martha, Gerard tried to become a priest. He was rejected based on his lack of faith. At first, this caused him to dig even deeper into the Catholic faith, but he eventually left the church when he found out they weren't really open to people questioning doctrine. Surprise, surprise. After this, he wanted to be a teacher. He began teaching social studies at a high school and was also a teaching assistant for some time at a junior college. He was fired at least twice from teaching positions because he was, quote, trying to impose his own moral and political values on students. In fact, one former boss of Schaefer's told him at the time of his dismissal that he better not hear of him ever trying to get another job which holds authority over others, and that he would do everything he could to prevent this. Sorry, buddy. You failed.
Yeah, it's not good.
In 1971, though, Gerard Schaefer secured a position less than 30 minutes from the high school he had taught at, and this time he was a police officer. In the same year, he got remarried to a woman named Teresa, and took less than a year for Schaefer to lose his job. There are inconsistencies regarding what happened, but the most likely story seems to be that Schaefer was using the police database to look up women's personal information and contact them for dates. Teresa just sitting at home, poor girl. He just took the next available job as a sheriff's deputy in Martin County, Florida, which is a little over an hour away, so he moved. He had developed a sort of obsession with the idea of capital punishment.
No.
More specifically, with hanging. I had mentioned before that Schaefer tied himself to trees sometimes when he was younger. He described to a psychiatrist that he would get sexually excited and then do something to hurt himself. And so he would tie himself to trees and masturbate. He wanted to learn all of the details of what happened to someone when they were hanged to death. Once, he had even written to a publishing company claiming to be doing research with a college, asking them to provide information on people urinating and defecating while being hanged.
Gross.
They said, request denied. No.
So sorry.
Another psychiatrist described Schaefer saying, I was able to hold his attention and cooperation for almost 2 hours of testing. Results indicate that he is immature, has poor ego control, is aggressive and rebellious, has intense father conflict, is inclined to blame others for his own difficulties, is confused in terms of self-image, feels alienated from himself and others, but has the ability to relate to others. End quote. He went on to say that Schaefer had an authority complex and that he seemed to be able to mimic the symptoms of depression for the goal of receiving attention. Yeah. Awesome. So, that is the background to set us up for what we're really here for, which is crimes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm going to take you through Schaefer's known crimes. Then we will get into additional suspected crimes. And I will try my best to keep us connected to where we are in his life at this time.
Okay.
So I tried when I started this to write it in chronological order and quickly realized not possible. So in 1972, 1 month after starting his new job at the Martin County Sheriff's Department, Schaefer was patrolling and saw 2 teenagers hitchhiking. Sue Wells, 18 years old with short brown hair, and Nancy and Nancy Trotter, 17 years old with long blonde hair, were headed to Chicago. Gerard pulled up next to them to tell them that it was illegal to hitchhike in Martin County. It was not. He then called his department and asked if it would be all right if he gave these 2 girls a ride home. Smart. They agreed
Why
to
do
the
you have to get permission for that?
Just so that no one thinks he's kidnapping these people.
Mm-hmm.
Probably. They agreed to the ride, and he took them back to where they were staying, and he asked what they were planning to do tomorrow. I guess now that they're not going to Chicago, they're probably like, well, what we were planning to do
Right.
didn't involve being here. You
Pretty clear,
fuckwad.
I thought.
They said that if they had a ride, they would love to go to the beach, but they don't, and they're not allowed to hitchhike. So, of course, lucky girls, Gerard Schaefer would be happy to take them just so that they could avoid the dangers of hitchhiking. But he wanted to make sure that they knew not to tell anyone that a police officer was going to give them a ride somewhere. Even though a police officer had just given them a ride.
Right.
That
Why
he did notify people about.
Right.
He picked them up the following morning in his plain clothes and his personal vehicle, a blue Datsun. On the way to the beach, he wanted to show them this cool old Spanish fort. So he began to drive down a dirt road to Hutchinson Island. This was exactly when the girls remembered that they hadn't told anyone who they were with that day, and they started to think it may have been weird that he asked them not to.
Yeah.
His attitude shifted abruptly, and he looked directly at both of the girls and said, quote, "You are runaways, and I will now be arresting you for running away," end quote, before placing them in handcuffs and into the back of his car.
Oh.
His personal, not police car. He tied Nancy and Sue up with rope, gagged them with pieces of fabric, and told them that if one of them tried to escape, he would kill the other one. Before tying both of them to a tree, he said that there's no crime without a body. While Schaefer was not looking, Nancy was able to spit the gag out of her mouth and chew through the noose. She was able to get free and took off running, all while handcuffed. But she also had the forethought to take the ropes with her in case her attacker was able to catch her, then he wouldn't have ropes to re-tie her.
Yeah. Okay. Smart girl.
So smart girl. She climbed into a nearby river and waited. She heard Sue calling her name, but she wasn't sure if she could trust it or if Gerard was making her friend scream to lure her back. So she continued on. She left her friend. She remembers hiding in the bushes by the river with snakes and spiders crawling all over her. And she swam through the water with handcuffs, being stung by jellyfish. This went on for hours
Stop.
before she was able to start begging cars to help her.
You lie.
I do not lie. It turns out Sue was also free and was making a run for it. She made her way to the road where a truck driver helped her call the police. Around the same time, a sheriff's deputy car pulled up near Nancy, which terrified her.
Yeah.
Obviously. She said,
That's who got me the first time.
Yeah, no thank you. However, it was not Schaefer. It was Robert Crowder, who did already know that they were looking for Nancy, but not because of the call from Sue and the truck driver. He had received a call from Gerard Schaefer himself. Schaefer said, quote, "I've done something foolish. You're going to be mad at me." He told Robert that he had picked up 2 girls that were hitchhiking, and he really wanted them to understand the dangers that they could possibly face if they keep hitchhiking.
Stop.
So he took them into a forest to scare them, but he admits he got a little carried away.
Sir.
A little.
I for one, I know they're gonna buy it, but I for one think no one should be buying this.
Gerard Schaefer was immediately fired and charged with aggravated assault.
Good.
He was released on bond to wait for his trial that would come 6 months later. During these 6 months, Sue Wells and Nancy Trotter moved to Martin County to live near their abductor, just so that they could be nearby for all of the trial proceedings.
Yes, bitch.
Queens.
They said, you thought you could scare us, but we not scared.
I'm going to play you a little clip of Schaefer talking about this crime.
Okay.
Specifically.
Convicted was, and they were runaways. Everything was proper and done according to the book, except I wanted to give them a scare. They laughed. They thought it was a joke. Well, because of the Son of Sam law, I'm not allowed to discuss that with the media. Eventually, I made a legal arrest, and I abused the prisoners. They were not raped or sexually assaulted or anything like that. I told them that they were leaving themselves open to be murdered, abused, and all that, running away with no money, no visible means of support. What are you going to do? How are you going to make a living? And they just laughed. You're going to sell drugs. You're going to sell pussy. What are you going to do? You got to put food in your mouth. And I said, well, they ha, 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 we'll just get along. I said, yeah, you'll get along. You'll wind up in a ditch, in my jurisdiction. And then I'll have to pick up the pieces. And I'll show you how easy it would be. Here you are under arrest. I know a guy who'll buy a young girl. Hell, I know 5 or 6 of them that would buy a young girl, make her into a whore. I mean, this is nothing new. Oh yeah, ha 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 ha. You think it's so funny? Well, we'll just tie you over here to this tree, and we'll tie you over to this tree, and I'll leave, and I'll bring somebody back and sell you. Well, I didn't. I tied them to the tree, but I didn't go and get anybody and sell them. I just wanted to give them a scare. And of course, that was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. I was trying to impress on them the dangerousness of their situation, running around. They were nice kids. I didn't want to see them end up in a ditch. And I was wrong, and I paid the price. And I pleaded guilty. I felt guilty. I gave them each a written apology. What else can I do, If I did something to you and I hurt you and caused you pain, then I have to say, if I'm wrong, I'm sorry I did it. And I am sorry, and I was sorry, and I apologized. I pled guilty, and that was the end of it. I fought. It's never the end of it.
While you were working in which job?
I was a deputy with Martin County when that happened. But see, they tried to distort that. They tried to say, well, that wasn't a legal arrest. And it was a legal arrest. In fact, they sued. It went away.
Okay.
They sued the county for the, I haven't seen a copy of the suit, but they did win a judgment against the county for what I did, which was abuse them while they were in my custody, legally in my custody. Not I picked them up and drove them to a remote area and tried to rape them or anything like that often gets distorted, you know. No, because I had a responsibility to make sure that they were safe and taken to the jail and processed properly and returned to their parents. And when I made the arrest, it was my responsibility to make sure from point A to point B to the jail and nothing in between. And I fucked it up. I blew it. You know, it happens, right? And because of that, I have suffered enormously. I lost my career, went to jail, got a felony on my record, but there was no evil intent. The intent was to impress on them that they could end up dead, which was true. But, you know, they suffered no physical harm. It was an emotional intimidation type of a thing. And it gave them a good scare, no doubt about that. But it was valid. Wrong. I'm not saying what I did was right, but they were valid. I bet you they don't hitchhike anymore.
I fucked it up. I was supposed to I was supposed to get them from point A to point B, but I fucked it up.
And I can't be held accountable for that.
By literally spending hours tying them to trees and torturing them. But okay.
My bad.
I just made a pit stop.
Sorry.
So, yeah, he gave us a bit of a spoiler that he pleads guilty. But I also just kind of wanted you to see him. Know what we're working with here.
What a guy.
So, while Mr. Schaefer was out on bond, he meets other women. Girls, actually. He met Susan Place. Right. He met Susan Place, 17 years old, and Georgia Jessup, who was 16, at an adult education center. Which, for my research, what I'm finding is that, like, essentially they, like, don't go to high school anymore and they go to this. So like a technical school something. Susan had previously been a student at the high school that Gerard had taught at, but now had quit high school and started taking courses at this education center. Susan played a lot of musical instruments and also had partial paralysis on her left side from her epilepsy. Georgia was known to be a free spirit and very trusting. She liked interior design, believed in reincarnation, and used crystals for their energy. When the girls met Gerard Schaefer, they were told that he was 16. Oh my God. No. That he was 26-year-old Jerry Shepard from Colorado. He told the girls that he was headed to Mexico soon, and they were excited about the possibility of getting to go with.
Me too.
Now,
take us to PG.
He might have been heading to Mexico since he's about to go to prison. On September 27th, 2 months before his aggravated assault trial would begin, Susan's mother, Lucille, came home to find her daughter and her friend Georgia in Susan's room with a man in his 20s named Jerry. She had a strange feeling about him. Yeah. I have a strange feeling just about that sentence, Lucille. So she did go ahead and just write down a description of Jerry's blue Datsun and his license plate number, just in case she needs it. Susan told her mom that she and Georgia were planning to join Jerry on an adventure sometime soon, but that for right now, they were all just going to go to the beach. So, no worries yet, Mom. They left around 8:45 p.m. on September 27th, and Lucille did not know that over at Georgia's parents' home, Georgia had left a note saying that she was running away to find herself. So after 4 days, when Susan had not returned, and Lucille had found her epilepsy medicine still at home, Lucille called Georgia's mom, Shirley. Shirley explained that Susan and Georgia were not with her, but that she had not been waiting to hear from Georgia because she had gotten that note from her daughter a few days prior. When Lucille explained that Susan was not planning to run away, although Georgia may have been, Shirley said, "Oh," and started to get concerned. The moms reported their kids missing and provided the police with the information about Jerry Shepard's car. When police ran the information, it was traced to a different car and a different person who had a firm alibi. It turns out, though, that the police had copied the number down wrong, and they were off by one number from what Lucille had told them. But months would pass before they realized their mistake. In November of 1972, 2 months after Susan and Georgia were last seen, Gerard stood trial for the aggravated assaults of Sue Wells and Nancy Trotter. The judge said, "I don't want to embarrass you, but you were a fool." Please do.
He said,
Proceed.
I said that on the phone. I've been
Yeah.
foolish.
I know. Yeah, I am fool. Schaefer took a plea deal where he pled guilty to one charge of aggravated assault. He was sentenced to 1 year in jail, would be eligible for parole after 6 months, and would be required to remain on probation for 3 years after release. He told reporters, "I made a stupid mistake. There was no sex involved. No one got hurt." Okay. He would not start to serve his 1 year sentence, though, for another month. Why? I don't get that. I never have understood that. I feel like they don't do that anymore. But like when they sentence you, but they're like, "We'll come get you later." Yeah. Like, okay. Early in the next year, Lucille reached out to the police again, saying that it didn't seem that they were doing much to find her daughter, and she would be happy to take over if they would just send her what they had. So they did. They said, "Fine, lady."
Sure.
Whatever. They sent over what they had gathered, and Lucille, along with Georgia's family, began investigating the disappearances on their own. She finally found a clue that would lead her to her daughter's kidnapper. She found a letter in her daughter's room from Jerry Shepard, so she drove to the return address listed on the envelope, which just so happened to match the correct license plate number. If policemen weren't stupid. But Lucille and Shirley spoke to the apartment manager, who told them that the man who lived at the address they were looking for was Gerard Schaefer, but that he had just gone to jail for the assault of 2 women. So you won't find him here. But he described Schaefer as a strange man who was often belligerent. And this was both reassuring and horrifying for these 2 mothers to hear.
Maybe not reassuring, maybe enlightening.
Maybe validating.
Yeah, they're like, okay.
They're like,
know what happened now.
We were not crazy. We were on the right track. Shirley and Lucille went to the local jail, where they gave the sergeant a photo of Susan and begged him to show the photo to Gerard Schaefer. He obliged, and Schaefer claimed that he never met her. The sergeant did also show Lucille a lineup out of which she identified Schaefer as Jerry Shepard, who she had met months before in her home. Unfortunately, nothing came of this identification, leading the families to do even more on their own, eventually taking all of the information that they had to the media. In April of 1973, hikers found human remains on Hutchinson Island. Within a few days, dental records proved these to be the remains of Susan Place and Georgia Jessup. Susan had been shot in the jaw. Both had been tied to the tree and, quote, butchered, which included decapitation, before their body parts were scattered. All of this was 6 miles from where Nancy Trotter and Sue Wells had been bound to trees on the same island. On a nearby oak tree, investigators found the initials GJ carved into the trunk, along with what seemed to be claw marks. The police executed a search warrant on Schaefer's mother's home a few days later. Inside, they found 37 blurry Polaroid photos showing women being hung or mutilated, women's jewelry, human bones and teeth. Teeth are bones, but just wanted to be specific. Weapons, and a 7-page paper about hanging a woman in a swamp area. They found literature and writings that confirmed Gerard's interest in people's bodily functions after their death. Many of the items found, including teeth and other bones, were connected to women and girls that had previously been reported missing, leading police to believe that Gerard John Schaefer could have been responsible for up to 28 abductions and probably murders. They also searched the home that he shared with his wife, where they found Susan Place's purse. The following month, Schaefer was charged with the first-degree murders of Susan Place and Georgia Jessup. His trial began in September, where Nancy Trotter and Sue Wells would not only testify, but would create a reenactment of the way that they were bound by Schaefer. These girls. Not stopping. Although Schaefer declares he is not guilty of abducting or killing these two girls, he says that Lucille is mistaken about the purse belonging to Susan. Her mom doesn't know what her purse looks like. Awesome. He was found guilty and sentenced to 2 counts of life in prison. These would be the only 2 murders that Schaefer would be charged with, but there are many others that police and the community believe that he is responsible for. According to his own writings later on in his life, he claims that his murders started in 1965, when he was just 19 years old. But he will also claim that none of this is true. Cool. We can trust nothing. Gerard John Schaefer would like us to know that he is simply an exceptional horror writer. In fact, he is greater than Stephen King.
He's the new wave Edgar Allan Poe.
Mm-hmm. But these are all works of fiction. And basically, he's being convicted for being an incredible fiction writer. While in prison, Schaefer, with the help of his ex-girlfriend, Sandra London, published a book titled Killer Fiction. It's genius. That's so genius. In it, he wrote graphic stories of raping and killing women, complete with
Isn't
drawings.
Sandra London like a hot mess?
I don't know anything about her, like personally, like her, other than she's the one that was like, he first told me he likes to hurt women. Okay. Whatever. So, along with his graphically detailed stories, he also had drawings, poems, diagrams, anything really you could ask for. Instructionals.
Yes, she is a hot mess because she dated him.
Yeah.
And then got engaged to another convicted serial killer named Danny Rolling. That's the one that I know her from, is the Gainesville Ripper case. That's right. Yeah.
A controversial American true crime author.
Yeah.
What else does she write?
And I think she's still engaged to Danny Rolling. Or, no, because he's dead.
She collaborated with Danny Rolling to write The Making of a Serial Killer, The Real Story of the Gainesville Murders. And, yeah, they were
they were engaged until he died.
Okay.
And I think
she did a study on vampirism.
I could be wrong, but I think that they're part of the reason that there's a law now that you can't make money off of writing about your own crimes, and that the money automatically goes towards like the victims' families.
Yeah. She has a book called Good Little Soldiers, a memoir of true horror. What could that
She's a fucking mess.
Ugh. Well, a good match here. Some of these stories included the actual names and details of his alleged victims. Alleged. The character in his novel, the main villain, I guess, was named the Ghoul, and he had a specific interest in having his victims drink excess amounts of water so that they would urinate more at the time of their death. If we're going to write fictional people, maybe let's not make them so similar to you, friend.
Right.
Okay. Schaefer's book provided some additional insight into the way that he thinks of women. He titled sections of his book Blondes on a Stick and Whores, ? What to do about them.
Can't live with them, can't live without them.
I barely even know her. In response to the copious amounts of evidence found in his home, he had explanations for everything. All of his weapons were perfectly legal. Some of them even were souvenirs. He had simply found documents connected to a specific victim while working in his capacity on the police force and just happened to keep them. The jewelry belonging to his former neighbor had been given to him as a gift. The well-detailed murder plans were fantasies that his psychiatrist had made him write down as a part of their treatment plan.
No.
And the teeth that were connected to one of the victims, those had been planted by his former roommate, who had once confessed to Schaefer that he killed this woman. What a life story. Like, he just has all these things just happen to him. He just has so many coincidences. Looking back, there are signs of this man associated with many other abductions in the area. In October of 1966, Nancy Leichner, 20 years old, and Pamela Nader, 21, went missing from the Ocala National Forest. They were on a trip with both of their boyfriends, but when the men returned from a swim in the lake, they couldn't find Nancy or Pam. For many years, the boyfriends were the obvious suspects, but no one was ever able to find any evidence of their involvement. This case remained unsolved for decades. In 2004, police discovered that they had already received a very useful tip back in the 80s, where an inmate claimed that Gerard had confessed to the murders of these women. Police also believed that some of the items found in the search of Schaefer's home probably belonged to these women, but this hasn't been able to be confirmed. Nancy and Pam's bodies were never found, but in 2004, the case was closed and Gerard Schaefer was named the most likely killer. In 1969, two women who had personally been connected to Schaefer went missing. Lee Hainline, his former neighbor who would tease him by getting undressed in her own room with the window open, went missing along with Carmen Halleck, whose friends say that she had been seeing a mystery man as of recently. Carmen had recently shared with her friends that she was offered a well-paying government job as an undercover informant by a man that she had met at Broward Community College. This is the community college where Schaefer was working as a teaching assistant. After a few days of not seeing her, Carmen's friend, Nancy, went to her apartment and found that her door was open, her bathtub was full of water, and her puppy was still there and seemed to have not eaten in days. A witness claims to have seen Carmen and Lee together shortly before their disappearances. Carmen had long auburn hair and Lee had short dark hair. In his own life, in 1969, Schaefer had just been let go from his high school teaching job because he had been talking to the class about how to evade the draft and how they should vote on upcoming bills. The way that he recommends avoiding the draft is pretending to be trans. Mr. Schaefer has a history, even before his little draft scheme, of cross-dressing, and this was linked back to the fact that his sister was his parents' obvious favorite, and that was maybe an attempt to be liked by them. But I'll have a little quote from his draft avoiding at the end. But yeah, so he told everyone, just go in and be a cross-dresser, and they will not want you. In the search of his mother's home, police found newspaper clippings about these two cases along with some of Carmen Halleck's teeth and Lee Hainline's bracelet. In his fictional stories, Schaefer just so happened to describe a victim named Carmen with auburn hair and wearing the exact same outfit that Carmen was last seen in. In another coincidentally similar story, Schaefer writes of a victim who was tortured and murdered while wearing a waitress's uniform identical to the one that Lee Hainline was wearing the day of her disappearance. In the story, the victim's remains were left near the side of a road. And, surprise, surprise, 9 years later, Lee Hainline's skull was found off the side of a road with 3 bullets in it and had been cut in half. You guessed it, it was the same road.
How long had it been there? Nobody saw.
Oh, 9 years, and like that's not like buried under brush. It's like,
yeah.
Is that like a not traveled road? Is it kind of covered? Yeah, I don't know. Some have connected him to another disappearance from that same year. In 1969, 9-year-old Peggy Ron and 8-year-old Wendy Stevenson went missing together while on separate beach trips with their families. They had met and were playing together on the beach. You know, like,
as they do.
You know when you like go to the beach with your family and you like meet another girl your age and like, we are best friends now.
We're beach friends.
That's what they did. How cute.
Yeah.
And they were last seen on the beach together. A store clerk remembers a man he estimates to be between 25 and 30 buying the 2 girls ice creams as well as cigarettes for himself. The first suspect for these 2 girls' disappearance was serial child molester Kenneth Guy Schiltz, who was arrested in Alabama 6 weeks later. He had a notebook entry titled Peggy and Wendy, Pompano Beach. For me personally, that's pretty damning.
Yeah.
But okay. However, it is also said that in 1989, so 20 years later, Gerard John Schaefer confessed to their murders in a letter. I don't remember where I put this, but the other thing about Mr. Schiltz, unfortunately, is that he's like known for his false confessions. But, actually, no, I think this is someone else. Never mind. I don't know. I think it's weird that they're saying that this guy kept a notebook with like his crimes and had their name in there, but then didn't do it. I mean, he could have just been interested in them, I guess. But also, Gerard John Schaefer do just be kind of saying shit. So like his could be a false confession, or he could have just been writing a work of fiction.
You know, he does stuff.
He does. He's just so good at putting himself in other people's shoes, especially that of a serial child molester. 1 year later, in 1970, Married. How would you pronounce Mared?
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 Is that a name?
First name.
Probably Mared.
Married Malaric, 19 years old, and Karen Farrell, 18 years old, went missing after being seen leaving a theater near West Virginia University where they were freshmen. Their bodies were found in a wooded area in makeshift graves, and both women had been decapitated. In 1976, Eugene Clausen, no, this is that guy I was thinking of. Eugene Clausen was found guilty of their kidnappings, rapes, and murders. And this was based on a confession, as well as the machete that they believed to have been used being found in his home. However, it turns out Clausen was known for his false confessions. So his conviction was overturned a year later on a technicality because he didn't have a lawyer present at the time of his confession. It is unclear what the direct tie is to Gerard John Schaefer. These 2 are listed as likely his victims. However, I did read somewhere that he was formally cleared in 1982. I don't really know what that means either. I feel like we don't know anything enough to clear anyone, but whatever. In 1972, we have a lot of women and girls go missing who could have been connected to Gerard John Schaefer. This includes the ones we've already talked about from this year, the attempted murders of Nancy Trotter and Sue Wells, and the murders of Susan Place and Georgia Jessup. Belinda Hutchins, 22 years old, was said to have dated Schaefer in the past and was last seen getting into a blue Datsun, much like the one he owned. In his mother's house, police found an address book that belonged to Belinda and contained the information for a Jerry Shepherd. Deborah Lowe, 13 years old, was last seen walking to her middle school. Gerard Schaefer worked with her father and had previously visited their home. That's all we have for that. It sounds like West Memphis 3. We're like, was in the home. Must be. Not much is known about Bonnie Taylor, 20 years old, who went missing in 1972 and had been pulled over by Schaefer at least once before for speeding. This one's interesting. The body of a 46-year-old man, Leonard Joseph Massar, was found buried on Hutchinson Island with his hands missing, and Schaefer made reference to his murder a few years after his conviction. I think it's just like, obviously, Schaefer does frequent Hutchinson Island and the hands missing thing. Elizabeth Wilt, 22 years old, had traveled to Florida from her home of Fayetteville, Arkansas for the Republican convention. Okay, 1972 Republican convention. Could be a different world.
She's from Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Yeah, whatever. Doesn't deserve to die.
No.
Her body was never found, but she had written a letter to her stepmom saying that she would be home in a few days. Like, I think it was basically like, I'm heading out. Should see you soon. So, have their radar up. Suzanne Poole, 15 years old, went missing during a time period that Schaefer had been temporarily freed from court. Her skeletal remains were found bound to a mangrove tree on Singer Island. Her remains, though, went unidentified until 2022. So sad.
God.
More in line with Schaefer's typical MO of taking two girls at once, 14-year-old Mary Briscolina ran away with her friend Elsie Farmer, 13 years old. In January of the following year, someone stumbled across a pair of maroon pants, and upon closer inspection of the area, they found a dead body. The young woman had been badly beaten and decapitated, but her hands were preserved in the soil, and there were visible defensive wounds on her hands. Her head was found nearby, and her jaw had been shattered. It was estimated that this victim had been dead for a few months and was between 16 and 22 years old. Close, but she was 14. Anthony Briscolina saw the news story and thought of his daughter Mary, who had left months before wearing maroon pants. He provided the police with her dental records to help in identifying this body. In the same area 2 months later, as condos were beginning to be built, they found another young woman's body with similar injuries, including decapitation. In addition to the dental records to identify his own daughter, Anthony was able to point investigators in the direction of the second girl because he knew that his daughter was last with her friend Elsie. In Schaefer's mother's home, police found jewelry that had belonged to Mary Briscolina. In 1973, just days before his life sentence for murder was to begin on January 15th, Colette Goodenough and Barbara Wilcox, both 19 years old, went missing. Colette had light-colored hair compared to Barbara's dark hair. They were hitchhiking from Iowa to Florida. Hitchhiking, a crime. They were hitchhiking to visit a friend that they had met in Iowa who told them that he lived in Florida. They stopped in Biloxi, Mississippi to spend one night with family, and this is where they were last seen. Police discovered that Schaefer had made long-distance calls from Cedar Rapids, Iowa to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, leading
Chilling in Cedar Rapids.
leading them to believe that he could have been connected. He admitted that he had left the state unlawfully that fall while on bond. I was a fool. I made a mistake.
You're
I
gonna
fucked
be
it up.
so mad at me.
He says he went on a hunting trip to somewhere that is like South Dakota. But he's not sure.
North Dakota?
Could be Iowa. In his mother's home, police found poems written by Colette, her birth certificate, her passport, her ID card for a mental health treatment center, and Barbara's license.
Sir.
Explain that away, mister. Explain it. In 1977, a truck driver found 2 skeletons tied together with wire and both cut in half. The girls' scalps were found in separate places. And I don't really know what this means, because that's like years, right? So like a scalp would have like
Right.
decomposed.
Yeah.
So I don't know if by scalp they mean like the top of the skull like is somehow like separate. And they just mean like the scalp area. I don't know.
Their hair?
But I just feel like it'd be gone by now. I don't know. It seemed obvious that the tree was used as the scene of torture and murder. I read that there was GJ carved into this tree as well, and that it looked recent, like because it wasn't like healed.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes me wonder, like, is this the same tree as before? But then, like, and it is, well, I don't know. Like, but it would be like 4 years from like either of the crimes that had the GJ. So does he carve lots of trees? Does he come back to scenes and carve trees? Some had wondered originally if the GJ was actually Georgia Jessup and like her way of like marking that she was there. But then it seems like that's not likely if it's happening. Like,
But I do think
times.
it'd be, when you first said that, I thought it was weird to carve just your first and middle initial and not like your first and last or all
Like,
three.
unless he somehow thinks like that's gonna keep him from being identified. And I don't know if you noticed, but on the video, like his name says GJ
That's
Schaefer.
true.
So then I'm like, does he like go by GJ? So stupid.
God, I hope not.
But then I'm like, I don't know how fresh carves stay. Like, so I just don't know. And I don't know if I'm just looking at incorrect reporting because it is from the 70s. But also in the tree though, cloth from the girls' dresses were caught in chop marks in the tree. In 1981, so a long while later, the top of Colette's skull was found. So no, the scalps couldn't be that because they hadn't even found the top of her skull yet. As I have mentioned, Gerard John Schaefer wrote a lot and talked a lot, but mostly wrote. He wrote one poem titled Georgia Peach, which included lines like, quote, "Pretty Georgia, sweet peach, now you're rotting on the beach. Young girl fled from her home for parts unknown to find her head," her letter said. "Now she's dead." End quote. Yeah, I think that was like her actual verbiage in the letter to her parents. She said, like, I'm going to go to like find my head. Another poem was titled Susie Prime, True Crime. Okay. It just feels not like something the most exceptional horror writer in the world would write, but it says, quote, "Susie Prime double time, 1, 2, 3, so efficiently swinging from the tree." End quote. One was even titled with the name of the mother of one of his victims. In Lucille, he writes, "Lucille, how did it feel, tearing your daughter from your breast? You closed that door on the teenage whore." End quote. Regarding his time avoiding the draft, I promised you this, he wrote, "I was drafted. I got down to the point of being sworn in, and in my best thespian manner, asked if it was going to be okay to be in the army if I'm queer. There's maybe 100 guys there, all macho posturing, and I come out with, I'm a queer. Fastest dismissal you ever did see. So I guess that part of the killer fiction book is supposed to be real, even though the rest of it isn't. Also want to add here that I did say the word queer. He obviously did not mean it in like a super fun, take the word back 2024 kind of way.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's surprising that he used the word queer.
Yeah, no. He meant it derogatory, but that's the misogyny in the 70s for you. This is his description of his book. Quote, "This book is a work of fiction. It is the duty of a competent fiction writer to inflame the imagination of his readers. This book will give you sleepless nights. Any person who reads it will never see murder as pure entertainment again. It is not intended to casually shock the reader. It delivers a serious social message, and some of my more insightful readers have discerned that at the core of my work is a life-saving message, especially for my female fans." End quote. He is trying to resensitize us to how awful murder is and to remember that we should be careful out there. Thank you. In various interviews, Schaefer has said things that would lead you to believe that he's guilty, though he continues to dispute it. He said, "Doing doubles is far more difficult than doing singles, but on the other hand, it also puts me in a position to have twice as much fun." This perfectly lines up with the pattern that we know him to have, taking 2 girls at once when possible, and typically one with dark hair and one with light hair. I'm also,
Interesting.
I'm also going to let you watch a video of Schaefer gushing about Mr. Ted Bundy.
Monster's eyes sparkle.
Ted was obsessed with being the #1 serial killer, and he liked his role as a celebrity killer. When he met me, he said, "Oh, I know you." He said, "Tell me, is it true that you got 34, or do you have private graveyards that they don't know about?" You know, because he had 36, and he thought that he was too ahead of me.
Was he reliving all the time his murders?
Well, I wouldn't say all the time, but I took he told me that he had followed my case in the detective magazines, and that he had killed 2 girls in Washington as a copycat crime, so to speak, on the place in Jessup. And I think those were Ott and Naisland. And he would tell me that he took them up on the logging road and strangled them and had sex with their corpses, and went back and had sex with their corpses and cut off their heads. Like, it's a tribute. And I'm thinking, you motherfuckers that wrote that. I said, here's the guy who read it, believed your bullshit, and went out and did something like this. And now he's like bragging to me. It wasn't exactly a brag, it was like a tribute. How many did you get, really, Jerry? They said 34. Did they get all of them? Or do you have private graveyards?
That is where we stop. The little mewing emojis the whole time were killing me.
Hard eyes.
Yeah. Also, what the fuck kind of copycat? He strangled them. Susan Place and Georgia Jessup were not strangled.
Yeah.
What?
He said, "It's your fault that Ted Bundy exists.
Yeah.
Because you made him believe all these things about me
Mhm.
that I'm now saying are true.
Yep.
And he went out and did them.
But he's like, oh, stop. But he's like, he has 2 more than me. And I'm like, do you not realize what you're saying, friend?
Yeah.
So weird. Now, you obviously hear him mention in the video the number 34, which we hadn't really talked about. He says, I guess that like this is like the number that has like been floated around at this point in time, because he says, I've always harped on the district attorney's list of 34. In 1973, I sat down and drew up a list of my own. As I recall, my list was just over 80. I'm not claiming a huge number, but somewhere between 80 and 110. Over 8 years and 3 continents. Do the pregnant women count as 2 kills? It gets confusing.
Continents.
Yeah, first of all, you're some like well-traveled man. You ain't never left Florida except to go to some place that you can't even fucking remember where you went.
Somewhere like South Dakota.
Can't even tell the difference in South Dakota and Iowa, and now we're supposed to believe.
And it's your
you're
first
traveling-
vacation?
You're traveling continents? Come on now. 80 and 110? Brother. I'm like, here are the options. You have killed absolutely no one in your life, and you just talk way too goddamn much, or you're a murderer, which is obviously the correct one. But not 80 and 110. I'm not trying to pick a big number.
He's like,
Also,
I
you're
would
claiming...
never.
Hmm.
He's like, I would never really murder anyone. It's just my writing. And then he's like, well, not like a big number. Just like
Yeah, I'm not
100.
claiming a huge number. All while I'm also technically claiming 0.
Right.
You bozo. In 1995, Gerard John Schaefer was stabbed to death by another inmate. Rah, rah. Although he was only charged with 2 murders, he has left a lasting legacy, now known as the Killer Cop, the Butcher of Blind Creek, and the Hangman. And the tree where multiple of his victims were bound is now known locally as the Devil's Tree. And that is it.
Thank you.
And I rented online his book for free for a short amount of time, just literally only for an hour, so that I could screenshot some of his things. So I do have some of those, which I will not include all of anywhere, but we'll probably post some of them.
Scary.
Very scary. What publishing company did this get through?
Sandra London.
I know this. We need to get rid of. Like, we got Corey Richins out here. Like, we got to get rid of like the self-publishing thing. Like, it's got to go through somebody.
Yeah, the Ghost Stories books that I read the other day, I'm pretty sure they were self-published because they're like stapled together with cardstock. But she has she has 2 other books, like actual like books, and I was reading the reviews of them on Goodreads, and both of them, all of the reviews said that they had to read them because she was teaching their creative writing course and made them read it as part of the course, and that they hated it, and that she was an awful teacher, and that like her writing is so bad. And I was like, this is awful. And I feel like that's Sandra London. She's like, I was made to write true crime. Yeah, I'm in it. Like, you're not Anne Rule. Stop.
Yeah. And like, I would, for intrigue, like maybe read something that Sandra London has done, but it's like, I don't want to read, like, if you read even a half a page of this, like, you will not read this. Like, you will not read killer fiction. Like, it is grotesque. Yeah. It is like when I had to read out loud the audio tape from the Toy Box Killer. Like, it's like horrifying. And so it's like, no, thank you. Like, that's not really, like, people don't like
Right.
that. That's stupid.
Like, the stranger beside me was so good, and like I would like just the fact that like she already knew Ted Bundy and they were friends, and then like in the middle I was like, I don't know about this, because she was like, I don't think he did it. Like, I don't think that I would stop talking to him even if he did. Like, we'd always be friends. And then it like gets to a certain point in his trial where she realizes that he did do it, and she like ran out of the courtroom and threw up, and then like never talked to him again. And I'm like, yes, girl. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Appropriate
And like,
response.
right. And she like says at some point in the book, like, I and sorry, I'm getting a lot into this book, but like one of the reasons she doesn't think he did it is because they met working at a rape crisis center, and she was like, how could somebody who works at a rape crisis center be a serial rapist and murderer?
Yeah.
And she says like something about how like that if if Ted sees this book one day, that he's gonna think that she like has turned on him, and like he's gonna think that like their friendship is over. And she's like, the truth is I never knew this man like for who he truly was. Like, he was putting on a facade. Like, if you're writing about your relationship with a serial killer in that way,
Yeah.
I am on board to read it. I want
Yeah.
to know like your experience, how it all went down. I'm here for it. If you're writing about your relationship with a serial killer and you're like, I fuck him, no,
Yeah.
please keep it to yourself.
No, yeah.
It's embarrassing.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't even know that they ever like got back in a relationship. So like, why are you doing this with this guy?
Right.
Like with him at least. Also, did he pronounce his name Jared? It kind of sounded like he did when he was talking about Ted Bundy said to me,
I thought
Jared.
he said Jerry.
Oh. Maybe he starts going by Jerry. Yeah, when I started doing this one, I was like shocked. I've literally never heard of this man.
Mm-hmm.
That could be because only 2 murders are like actually like assigned to him. But he's crazy. Crazy man.
Yeah.
So you listened to Mary's last 2 weeks ago that had a hopeful ending.
Yeah, sorry.
Wasn't gross. And then now you're here. And
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And next time, a mystery.
Nice. Nice, nice, nice. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.